Today is Saturday, March 9th, 2019. It's a pleasure to be back at Endless Path Zendo. We had a wonderful session at the Toronto Zen Center, our Jataka session. It was really terrific. If you go to the Endless Path Zendo Facebook page, you will see some photos from session. It really was really good. But it's really a pleasure to be back here in our intimate Zendo here with all of you. So we'll continue going through before Buddha was Buddha, but not using the text from the book, but the complete stories, not the synopses, and newly revised commentaries. Today we're looking at the Padak Usalamanava Jataka, number 432, in the Pali collection of 547 such past life tales of the Buddha on the path. The Jataka goes like this. Ages ago in Benares, a king confronted his queen about a personal ethical lapse of an intimate nature. She answered forcefully, declaring an oath. If I have sinned against you, may I become a female yaksha with a long face like that of a horse. Someone should have warned her. Not long after this, she fell ill and died, and was indeed reborn as a yaksha with a long horse face. As a female ogress, or yaksha, she no longer lived in a splendid palace, but in a cave in a mountain overlooking a forest. For her food, she caught travelers, tore them apart, and devoured them. After serving the king of the yakshas for 3 years, she was given her own territory. It extended 30 leagues out and 5 across, essentially 90 miles by 15, a good homestead. One day, a handsome, wealthy Brahmin took the road through her domain. The yaksha laughed aloud to see this prize, and rushed from her cave to grab the man. Seeing her coming in great leaps and bounds, the Brahmin's followers took to their heels, leaving him terrified and alone. The yaksha grabbed him, flung him over her shoulder, and headed back in great bounding leaps to her cave, thinking only of a good meal ahead. But in carrying the man, something odd happened. That bit of human contact awoke something almost forgotten deep within her. When she reached her cave, instead of devouring the Brahmin, she found herself overcome by affection. Setting him down, she spoke kindly to him and made him her husband. From that day on, human man and ogre woman lived harmoniously together as husband and wife. As an ogress, she still had to eat, so she continued to catch travelers and devour them. Only now she brought their good food, oil, rice, jewels, and clothing to her husband. When off on her shopping trip, she sealed the mouth of her cave with a huge stone, guaranteeing that her husband wouldn't leave. Soon, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha in a past life, was conceived as the child of the handsome Brahmin and the female yaksha, or ogress. 10 months later, she gave birth, and filled with love for her son and husband, continued to feed and care for them. Whenever she left, she put the child in the cave with her husband before sealing the mouth of the cave with that boulder. One day, when the Bodhisattva and his father were locked in the darkness of the cave, the boy had had enough. Summoning his great yaksha strength, he pushed the stone aside and let his father out from the darkness. When the ogress returned, she was astonished to see them both outside the cave. "Who moved the stone?" she asked. The Bodhisattva said, "I did, mother. Father and I cannot stay in darkness." Then, because of her love for her child, she said nothing. Ogress though she was, though, she began to worry. Her child was growing up. What then? What then? One day the boy said to his father, "Father, you and mother have different shaped mouths and teeth. Why?" The father answered, "Like you, I am human, but your mother is a yaksha, an eater of human flesh." The Bodhisattva said, "It's time to leave this dark cave and wild forest and go where human beings live." "We can't," said the man. "If we tried, she would come after us, and once she caught us, she'd probably kill us." "No, she won't. Don't be afraid," said the Bodhisattva. "I'll get us out of here. Then we'll go together to where people live." The next day, when the yaksha was away, the boy roused his father, and off they went, as fast as their legs could carry them. When the yaksha returned, she called, but no one answered. Searching, she found footprints. Off she went, faster than a galloping horse, in great leaps and bounds, tracking those steps. She soon caught up with her runaways. "O Brahman," she cried, "why have you run from me? Is there anything you lack?" "My dear," he answered, "don't be angry. Our son is grown. He's a man. The time has come for him to leave home. It is the way of life." The yaksha looked at her husband and her son, and her anger faded. She felt only love. "Do not fear," she told them. "Come back and live with me. I will always take care of you." And she led them back to the cave. Traveling home, the Bodhisattva thought, "My mother is powerful, but perhaps her power has limits." Days later, he said, "Mother, as one day what is yours will be mine. Please, tell me the boundaries of our realm. I would know my inheritance now that I am grown." "Dear," she said, looking tenderly at him, "our realm extends 30 leagues straight out from our cave. It's 5 leagues across in width, stopping just this side of the river. We have a goodly realm," she added with some pride. "This is our place, and one day it will be yours." Several days later, when the yaksha was gone, the Bodhisattva set his father on his shoulders and set off at a fast pace for the river boundary. His mother, returning, finding them gone, set off rapidly following the traces of her son's tracks. The Bodhisattva came to the river. Wading into the water, he stood with his father on his shoulders in the middle of the stream. His mother came racing up. Standing on the shore where her realm ended, unable to go further into the water, she pleaded with them to return. "What have I done? Why have you left? What is my offense? Didn't I take good care of you? Come back! The world out there beyond my control is dangerous." The Bodhisattva's father tapped his son on the shoulder. "Put me down," he said. "You have your life and I mine." The Bodhisattva set his father down and watched as he waded back to shore to the ogress. The yaksha called, "Dear son, come back too. We are a family. Come back to me." "Mother," he said, "I cannot. The time has come for me to seek my own way. I am now a man and must seek out the ways of my kind. Will you not return?" "No, I will not." "If you will not return, but choose to live in the world of men, you should know that life out there is not as simple as it is here. You will need a craft or skill if you're going to have any hope of prospering. I have the power to follow footsteps, even if they were made as far back as 12 years ago. I give this to you." The Bodhisattva, standing with hands pressed palm to palm, received the gift of his mother's charm, a spell that descended upon him from her heart. He bowed and said, "Thank you. Now farewell, mother." The ogress said, "If you will not return, I cannot live." And she fell to the ground and died. Though she was an ogre, she really loved that boy. The Bodhisattva waded to the shore. There he and his father built a funeral pyre for the yaksha who had been both loving mother and wife. With lamentations and weeping, they burned the body and made offerings. When all was done according to tradition, they set off for Benares. Once there, the Bodhisattva went to the palace. The king, told that a strong youth who claimed to be extraordinarily skilled in tracking footsteps was seeking entrance. And he said, "Admit him." The Bodhisattva, entering the throne room, was asked, "How great is your skill?" The ogre child said, "Sire, I can track footsteps even if 12 years have passed since those tracks were first made." "That is a great skill," exclaimed the king. "We will give you 1,000 pieces daily. Just remain in our service." One day the king's priest said, "Sire, though you pay this young man a lot of money, he has not yet done any tracking for you. We should find out if he is good as he claims." "You're right," said the king. "We shall put him to the test." That night the king and the priest went to the royal treasury and pocketed valuable jewels. They descended from the palace terrace and in the dark groped their way 3 times around the palace. Then they took a ladder, placed it against the palace wall, and climbed over and down to the ground. They entered the hall of justice and sat there for a time. Then they took the ladder to the top of the wall and descended into the city. They walked around the city's bathing tank. Wrapping the jewels in cloth, they dropped them into the water, letting them sink to the bottom. Then they went back up the ladder to the palace terrace. The next morning a cry was raised, "Treason! Treason! Treasure has been stolen from the king's treasury." The king summoned the Bodhisattva. "Now, we must put your talents to the test. Find for us what has been stolen." "My lord," said the Bodhisattva, "even if the thieves stole the treasure 12 years ago, I could still follow their steps today. There'll be nothing marvelous in finding treasure stolen only last night." Honoring his mother's memory, the Bodhisattva repeated the words of the mantra, or dharani, like charm. Then he said, "My lord, the steps of thieves, there were 2, I see, start to appear. Let us follow." He walked, followed by the king and others of the court, and entered the royal chambers, descended to the terrace, made 3 circuits of the palace, and approached the wall. Standing on the wall, he said, "Bring a ladder. I discern footsteps in the air." A ladder was brought. Following the footsteps, he descended the ladder and entered the hall of justice. He sat there. Returning to the palace and the wall, he climbed down to the water tank. He circled 3 times and announced, "My lord, the thieves went into this tank." He stepped into the bathing tank and, walking down the steps, lowering his head and arm into the water, retrieved a cloth package. Unwrapping the cloth, he held it up and showed what he'd found. "Are these your missing jewels?" "They are," said the king. The crowds gathered around the water tank were astonished and raised a cheer. "You have found the treasure. Now, catch the thieves," ordered the king. "The footsteps returned to the palace," said the Bodhisattva. "The thieves may be men of distinction. Can you catch them?" asked the king. "My lord," said the Bodhisattva, looking straight at the king, "you have your missing treasure. Why uncover the thieves? Let them be." "No," said the king. "You have received good money. Now you must show your skill. Reveal the thieves." "My lord," said the Bodhisattva, "first let me tell you a story. Once a famous singer sat by the riverside after a successful performance. Having brought a gourd of strong drink with him to celebrate, he drank until he was drunk. Then he thought, "I must sling my lute around my neck and walk into the river to see how deep it is." He slung on his lute and stepped into the water. The lute, filling with water, began to sink, dragging him down. His wife, running along the bank, tried to reach him, but could not. Then she called to him, "Sing a new song so I can learn it and earn my living from your talent even when you're gone." He answered, "Water that saves us from death and should be our refuge is killing me. I have no breath left with which to sing. I am going down. What should have been my refuge has proved my bane." "Sire," said the Bodhisattva, looking again straight at the king, "if danger arises from the source of our protection, where can we turn? Do you understand? I don't understand hidden meanings, said the king irritably. Bring forth the thieves. Show us your great skill, if you have it. The Bodhisattva said, Majesty, listen. I have yet another tale. A famous potter went to dig clay from a certain mountain cave, where the best clay was found. While he was digging out clay from deep within the cave, rain began to fall. It poured down heavily on the mountainside. The ground softened, and the cave collapsed. The potter still inside. Badly injured, he cried, the great earth, our support, and the source of all my fame and well-being, has injured me. What has been my refuge has become my bane. My lord, when the earth, the refuge of the people, turns against them, all are in danger. Can you recognize the thief whose identity is hidden in this tale? I have no time for hidden meanings, said the king, clearly annoyed. You've been paid well. Reveal the thieves. If you have the skill, then out with it. No more delays. My lord, said the Bodhisattva, please, listen. Once a great tree, refuge of many birds, was caught in a great wind. The branches rubbing back and forth in that wind began to smoke, then burst into flames. The birds flew off, fleeing for their lives, abandoning their ancient home. As they flew, they cried, what has been our refuge has become our bane, sire. The king is the refuge of the people. Please take note and let me stay silent. Speak, reveal the thieves, insisted the king. The Bodhisattva, ogre child, thought, I've made it as plain as I can, but the king is foolish and will not allow me to shield him. Very well then, your majesty, he said. I will do as you order. And he told all. When the people heard how the king had played them and stolen from his own treasury, creating chaos throughout the city, they grew angry. The king and priest are our refuge, they thought, yet they have proved false. Plus, the king was a complete fool. He didn't have the discretion or wisdom enough to understand what this young man was so thoughtfully saying to him. The king does not know when enough is enough, nor is he capable of clear thought and insight. How can we trust him to lead us after this fiasco? Let us cast him and his priest out. And rising up, that is what they did. Calling on the Bodhisattva, though he was indeed merely the child of an ogre, they made him their new king. So that's the child of an ogre, Jataka. One thing that is not in the commentary, something that I realized recently very recently about this story is interesting. Actually, two things I'd never seen before. One is taking refuge in what used to be our support. When we take refuge in chanting services, we take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. This counters our taking refuge in our old habits of mind, and our old ways of living and thinking, and in our habitual unconscious self-centeredness. What had been our support until now, and indeed all our conditioning, has helped us become the people that we are. Beyond a certain point, that very conditioning becomes the thing that limits and in the end cripples, perhaps kills us, shutting down our potential to be fully grown-up human beings. We can't stick with what we've grown up with to this point. We have to go beyond it. We have to mature past it. So this thing of taking refuge in what is no longer useful to us is pointed to in this story. So we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as a step towards going out into a wider world, not being trapped in our little cave in the mountain that'll collapse on us, not stepping into that same river in which now will drown and not staying in that old tree, which is going to burst into flames. It can't support what we're attempting to do, which is to grow up completely beyond self-centeredness, habitual self-centeredness. This is the meaning of the way of the Bodhisattva, the way of the wisdom being. It doesn't mean necessarily, wisdom doesn't mean intellectual smarts. It means the grown-up being, the wise being who's matured beyond self-centeredness. So that's the first thing that I never really saw before in this story, and it's not in the written commentary, even the revised one. The other thing is simply intriguing. I've been looking into, I've always been fascinated by the arising of Homo sapiens sapiens, human beings, and artistic and creative natures, which really seemed to suddenly arise about 40,000 years ago. Recent explorations of the earliest forms of cave art suggest that perhaps the oldest universal form of religion, of religious consciousness, which doesn't mean belief system, but a kind of maturing awareness of human beings centered around the bear, the figure of the bear. Cave bears scratched marks on the walls. It taught us how to draw on walls and how to write. Very important to people at the movement from the Orignation 36 or so thousand years ago into whatever I forget our contemporary period would be called. Additionally, the bear hibernates. It seems to die every year and comes back to life renewed. Female bears return with young out of the caves. So there's a sense of rebirth and renewal. This we can trace throughout Asia into Native and North America, Siberia, indeed around the world, this faith in the bear mother, this most ancient religious impulse coming out of human experience 35, 40,000 years ago. And cave art reflects a great deal of this awareness. This is the beginning of our really human consciousness. Coming out of the cycles of the bear mother stories, which could be found in various forms all around the world, suggesting that is really the oldest structure of story that we know of, are stories of the bear son. So this goes back to the Paleolithic, which probably in these societies was matriarchal in many ways. As our societies move towards patriarchy, stories of the bear son became more and more important, and the adventures of the bear son. My sense is that in this Jataka and other Jatakas like maybe the blue bear Jataka, which we've spoken about before, we see remnants of a Paleolithic awareness which is absorbed into Buddhist tradition. The ogre's child is the bear's son. The ogre is the female bear living in a cave in the forest. And so we're dealing with a very archaic sense of possibility, really early structures of the human imagination. There's something very powerful here. Now, we'll go on to the commentary. Every day we hear stories, share stories, and tell ourselves stories. Buddhism is a story, as is the self, rehearsing its own repetitive narrative through the days and events of our lives. Our path of inquiry in Zen practice means waking up to the true nature of this elusive narrator, and then doing whatever work is needed to shift the narrative. Do good, avoid evil, save the many beings. This is the path of all Buddhas. This is the story we learn to work on telling every day with action and through ongoing Zen practice, not simply with words. Stories each have consequences. Unlike so many tales of religious founders, the Jatakas don't show the Buddha to be as always perfect. Rather, the Jatakas reveal him to be an earnest work in progress. The tales even show him making mistakes, getting trapped by his own self-centered desires, then working hard to refine his practice and get free. As fanciful as Jatakas may seem to be with their vast timescales, talking animals, and non-human beings like devas, nagas, kinnaras, yakshas, such straight talk about shortcomings gives us pause to consider that the stories might be truer than we think. They are not mere hagiographies, but show the Bodhisattva as someone very much like us, not perfect, but perfectly committed to going further, working always on his own unresolved issues and difficulties, working with them and through them to mature to greater functioning and greater selflessness. In this Jataka, the Buddha-to-be is born into less than ideal circumstances. Less than ideal? He is the child of an ogress, and he and his father are kept locked in a cave so they can't run away. Talk about a flawed start in life. Talk about a confining, devouring love. His mother, like one of Sendak's wild things, is a monster who loves her child so very, very much she might just eat him up. His genealogy is quite a bit less than perfect. In this life, the Bodhisattva is only half human. His other half is primitive, elemental, earthy, even monstrous. Yet he is honest, skillful, determined, kind. He tries to help his father, honors his mother, and does what he can to keep the king from his own self-absorbed, self-destructive foolishness. We fall into traps when we start comparing our stories. Am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Our self-limiting tales. We have this breath, this koan point, this brief moment in which to choose to act on our vow to awaken and be of use to all. It is a choice we make again and again. With each breath, we make this choice. If we don't, we fall back into the cave of our old story and end up treading our same old bit of inherited real estate, the world and psyche we've been conditioned to identify with as our own. Roshi Kapleau used to say we each had a mother and a father. It's enough. That is, being born, we have each of us all we need to practice having a human body, a human mind. We each, regardless of the specifics of our backgrounds, have the rare opportunity to practice realization. Zen tradition affirms that our nature right now is none other than the nature of a Shakyamuni Buddha, indeed of any and all Buddhas. His nature, even when he was the half-human child of an ogress, was no different than his nature when he was the Buddha. He didn't acquire a different, better nature later on. His nature and our nature, Zen tradition tells us, are no different from fundamental nature, the originating principle of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Hakuin spells it out. From the beginning, all beings are Buddha. All beings, every being, not just those with good cheekbones, above average intelligence, and completely supportive life circumstances. And he concludes, this very body, the body of Buddha. This body, this flawed, aging, asymmetrical, somewhat ogreish body, the body of Buddha. What? How can that be? The Buddha was radiant, perfect, noble, distinguished, physically impressive. It said that kings were awed just to be in his presence. If we accept that Hakuin was a greatly realized Zen master and not a fool or a liar, then, if we're honest, at some point we're going to need to understand for ourselves what he meant. And I don't mean intellectually, but down in the marrow of our bones. So as to this body, maybe your mother was an ogress or your father an ogre. Maybe you're a bit ogreish yourself, showing the effects of your ogre lineage and upbringing, your ogre meals and vacations, as well as perhaps of having been shut in a dark cave without the light and air you craved. What's more, your ogreish past has created difficulties that you now must face and deal with. Join the club. The Buddha knew all that too. In this Jataka, he had a complex relationship with his mother and with his father, who seems to disappear from the story. His parents had such different backgrounds that they must have hardly understood one another in reality. They certainly did not sit down to the same table or share the same meals. And yet, the Jataka suggests that there was something between those parents, as well as between them and their child, something genuine and real. Who can explain karma? Like the bodhisattvas, where we've come from, like the bodhisattva, where we've come from has given each of us enough fuel to light our Dharma fire. It is a start. And while our fire may at the moment be no more than a spark or candle in the darkness, it is real, and it is our own. Now, our job is to continue on, to feed our little flame until it is bright and steady enough to light up everything. We start from where we are. Even a hideous ogre can in time show love. Even the hardest of hearts can melt. Even flesh-eating, blood-drinking, fanged and frowning mouths can turn up in tender smiles. The queen, who'd become an ogress through her own self-centered failings, found fulfillment and love as a parent. This too is a mystery. Surely it was not just by chance that the Buddha-to-be was born as her child. What was their karma? What would their future karma be? Lifetimes in the future, did she become Queen Maya, the Buddha's birth mother who died 7 days after giving birth to him? The framing story of the present does not reveal her future identity. But some relationship was at work, one that might unfold further or farther in lives to come. Even as an ogre, she's quite human, putting pressure on her husband and son to come back, never leave her. What loving mother hasn't had some such wish? What loving parent? And what of that magical gift? We've all received magical gifts from our ancestors, gifts of language, aptitude, proclivities, skill sets ranging from knowing how to tie our shoes and use a toilet to a talent for playing the piano or painting a landscape. In this case, the gift is exactly what the bodhisattva will need to be successful. The underlying vision is one of immense freedom and unlimited potential. With the right skills and the right attitude, even the child of an ogre can become king. The Buddhist view as dramatized by the Jatakas is clear. Birth does not make us who we are. Practice, aspiration, and deeds make us who we are. Anyone, even someone from the lowest rank in ancient India's caste-bound society, upon entering the Sangha would instantly be the equal or even surpass the noblest. A barber entering the Buddhist order before a prince would be considered the senior and so held in the higher regard. The ogre mother gives her child a perfect gift, then heartbroken dies. Awakening a tender heart, she is released from her ogre body. This is reminiscent of that mangy little fox in the second case of the Mumonkan in Japanese, the gateless barrier. who, released from his fox body, gets buried as a priest. Her ogre karma, the result of the self-centered lie told in a past life, is over. She found freedom through love. Like a bodhisattva's son, she did not let an ogreish nature prevent her from experiencing something higher. Even as an ogre, she attained a condition of selfless love. That foolish vow from her previous selfish life ultimately led to an unexpectedly positive transformation. It's like the old woman in the Zen story. The story goes, the story is titled Chasing a Cow to Zenkoji. The story goes like this. An old woman chased a cow who had run through her yard and caught some of her laundry on its horns. So she's chasing this cow with the laundry caught on its horns, and the cow runs into Zenkoji temple. The woman runs in after, furious, going to get her laundry from the cow. And inside the temple, instead of the cow, she meets the living presence of Kannon Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva of endless compassion, and the old woman is transformed. As the saying goes, another Zen saying, she thought iron, but got gold. In other words, we can start off with a minimal aspiration. We can start off with the most trivial reason for starting to practice. We don't know how deep or how wonderful is the realm we may run into if we keep going. That's the point of following the cow to Zenkoji. We start with the most minimal idea of what practice is about. But if we keep going, we meet the living Kannon face to face and are transformed. Sages, it's said, can see the tracks of a bird flying across the sky like so many footsteps in the air. Perhaps animals, too, have such abilities. Andre the seal, honorary harbor master of Rockport, Maine, was for several years kept safe in the Boston Aquarium during winter's harshest months. The man who'd found him as an abandoned pup would bring him to Boston from Rockport in a car. It was a 200-mile trip each way. Come spring, he'd return to Boston and put Andre back in the car and drive him home. One year he had an intuition. So one year, instead of driving to Boston to get Andre, he had Andre simply taken to Boston Harbor and released. 4 days later, Andre the seal showed up back in Rockport, having swum all that way on his own through a portion of sea he'd never even seen before. Had he followed scent trails in the water, star patterns in the night sky, or what? No human knows. But clearly there was a trail of footsteps he followed. After that, that's how he got home every year, swimming there on his own. We too follow footsteps. Koans, sutras, ceremonies, Buddhas on altars are signs, footprints left for us to follow by those who've walked this same path to maturity before. There are billions of humans on this planet. Many don't see these signs at all. Somehow, we do. Is this ability the gift of our ogre parents and ancestors, of our own past efforts and karma? Love can be strange, coming to and from us in odd ways, not necessarily fairy tale or happy ending ways. No childhood is perfect, not even the Buddhists. Prince Siddhartha, he whose wishes are fulfilled is what the name means. His mother died 7 days after his birth. There was a stain, a loss, a yearning that no amount of wealth, kindness, or security could resolve. His father worried about a prophecy that said if his son experienced the truth of impermanence, he'd give up all claim to the throne and like a beggar leave home to seek enlightenment. So he kept feverish watch over the boy, trying in every way to keep all such knowledge from him. He wanted to ensure that his son would reign when his own time ended. that constant hovering parental anxiety, must also have marred what otherwise could have been a perfectly happy, blessed, enviable childhood. But it wasn't. Following the Buddhist footsteps on the ancestors' trail, we uncovered deep wisdom in old stories. This is the foundation of our koan path. It also is our entrance into the Jatakas. This challenging, energizing work of practice realization rolls the stone from our dark cave. Outside that cave, what Blake called our caverned self, is light, air, color, life. Once we start practicing, we need not be concerned with any of the less than perfect aspects of our upbringing or inheritance. Of course, if there are problems that shut us down or stymie us, we should seek help and learn to work on and with them. We mature by dealing with our issues, not by ignoring them. What then should we be concerned about? Here's Hakuin's take, written to a lay student and friend, a doctor, on all that need bother us. This is Hakuin's letter to the layman Ishi, written in the year 1734. You can find it in The Complete Poison Blossoms from a Thorn Hedge, which is a wonderful collection of Hakuin's incidental writings, letters, koan commentaries, inscriptions on paintings and poems translated terrifically by Norman Waddell. So here's a quote from that letter. Students who have not yet penetrated the source should not be troubled if their entrance into enlightenment is slow in coming. They should only be troubled if their practice fails to attain a genuine purity. Students who have already penetrated to attainment should not be troubled if people fail to revere them. They should only be concerned about the difficulty of making their attainment complete. That's it. Long ago, the Buddha, in this unusual past life as child of an ogre, shows the ancient way. He didn't let his own difficult, less than perfect past stop him. He used his innate intelligence, wisdom, sensitivity, and talent fully, allowing them to take him where they would, willing to go as far as he could. Ogreish as we too are, this story is a trail marker, pointing us towards our own as yet unrealized, deepest potential. The path goes on. We have a rare opportunity to practice the ancient way. The Dharma, incomparably profound and minutely subtle, is rarely encountered, even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. Now we can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning. The path goes on. We have this rare opportunity to practice this ancient way of maturing, a way that goes anciently back, helping us to become truly grown-up human beings. So let us vow to do our best, to keep going, and find out what lies ahead. As Hakuin says, Zen Buddhist practice realization is like a mountain. The more we climb it, the higher it gets. It is like the ocean. The further we go into it, the deeper it gets. So onward, awake, rejoice. We'll stop here and recite